All right, welcome to day 221 of our Read Through the Bible for 2019. We're in Isaiah 6, 7, 8, and 9. Some of my favorite chapters in terms of Christology. I love Isaiah chapter 9. You'll recognize some of the language from probably your experience of Christmas time as in years past. Isaiah chapter 6. The throne room scene is a great exposition and explanation of the holiness of God. We see the seraphim, whose purpose is to represent the guarding of the holiness of God in the throne room. We see Isaiah coming to a very stark understanding of his standing before God and his lack of holiness. And then we see him recognizing his unfitness for the work, God making him fit and sending him with the message. When Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me," we see that the message is not necessarily one of salvation. It is one of judgment. God intends that the message of Isaiah go forward and that it be rejected. And so pay close attention to that. Isaiah chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 6, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw, so again, we're talking, one of the things about the Bible is that we have a historical context. This is not just something fanciful. This is Isaiah recording when this happened. Just as the first chapters of Isaiah recognize that it was the time after Israel had been carried off into captivity, and he's speaking to Judah and Jerusalem. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, "Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, "Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Interesting, we see the Lord singular speaking with the us plural. Some would say that that's a majestic plural, which was sometimes used of kings. Personally, I think that it represents the reality of the Trinity. Then I said, "Here I am, send me." And he said, "Go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand." This is the message God's sending Isaiah with. "Keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed." See, it's God's intention that they not turn. It's an interesting fact. Then I said, "How long, O Lord?" And he said, "Until cities lie waste without an inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste, and the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And though the tenth remain in it, it will be burned again like a terebinth or an oak whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump." Chapter 7. In the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem. Actually, I was incorrect. I said earlier this was after Israel fell. It wasn't, because Remaliah is there. To wage war against it, but could not yet mount an attack against it. When the house of David was told, "Syria is in league with Ephraim," the heart of Ahaz and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. And the Lord said to Isaiah, "Go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Jashub your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the washer's field, and say to him, be careful, be quiet, do not fear, do not let your heart be faint because of these 2 smoldering stumps of firebrands at the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the son of Remaliah. Because Syria with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah has devised evil against you, saying, let us go up against Judah and terrify it, and let us conquer it for ourselves, and set up the son of Tabeel as king in the midst of it. Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, and it shall not come to pass, For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And within 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered from being a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God. It will be deep as Sheol or high as heaven. Let it be deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you weary men that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the boy knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread will be deserted. The Lord will bring upon you and upon your people and upon your father's house such days as has not come since the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria. In that day, the Lord will whistle for the fly that is at the end of the streams of Egypt and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria, and they will come and settle in the steep ravines and in the clefts of the rocks and on all the thorn bushes and on all the pastures. In that day, the Lord will shave with a razor that is hired beyond the river, with the king of Assyria, the head and your hair and the hair of your feet, and it will sweep away the beard also. In that day, basically saying you will be humiliated by one outside of this land. In that day, a man will keep alive a young cow and 2 sheep, and because of the abundance of milk that they give, he will eat curds. For everyone who is left in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, every place where there used to be 1,000 vines worth 1,000 shekels of silver will become briars and thorns. With bow and arrows, a man will come there, for all the land will be briars and thorns. And as for all the hills that used to be hoed with a hoe, you will not come there for fear of briars and thorns. But they will become a place where cattle are let loose and where sheep tread. Chapter 8. Then the Lord said to me, Take a large tablet and write on it the common characters belonging to Mahar-shalal-Hashbaz. And I will get a reliable witnesses, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Zeberechiah, to attest for me. And I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, Call his name Mahar-shalal-Hashbaz, for before the boy knows how to cry, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. The Lord spoke to me again, because this people has refused the waters of Shiloah that flow gently, and rejoice over Rezin, then the son of Remaliah. Therefore, behold, the Lord is bringing up against them the waters of the river, mighty and many, the king of Assyria and all his glory, and it will rise over all its channels and go over all its banks, and it will sweep on into Judah. It will overflow and pass on, reaching even to the neck, and its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Be broken, you peoples, and be shattered. Give ear, all you far countries. Strap on your armor and be shattered. Strap on your armor and be shattered. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. For the Lord spoke thus to me with his strong hand upon me, and warned me not to walk in the way of this people, saying, Do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. And he will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense and a rock of stumbling to the houses of Israel, to both houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many shall stumble on it. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken. Bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts, who dwells on Mount Zion. And when they say to you, Inquire of the mediums and the necromancers who chirp and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living, to the teaching of the testimony and to the testimony? If they will not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn. They will pass through the land, greatly distressed and hungry. And when they are hungry, they will be enraged and will speak contemptuously against their king and their God, and turn their faces upward And they will look to the earth, but behold distress and darkness, and the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. Chapter 9. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. All right. Who came from Galilee? All right. We see Jesus of Nazareth, the Galilean. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor you have broken, as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. The Lord has sent word against Jacob, and it will fall on Israel and all the people who know. Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, who say in pride and in arrogance, the bricks have fallen, but we will build with dressed stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will put cedars in their place. But the Lord raises the adversaries of Rezin against him and stirs up his enemies. The Syrians on the west and on the east and the Philistines on the west devour Israel with open mouth. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. The people did not turn to him who struck them, nor inquire of the Lord of hosts. So the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail, palm branch and reed in one day. The elder and honored man is the head, and the prophet who teaches lies is the tail. For those who guide this people have been leading them astray, and those who are guided by them are swallowed up. Therefore, the Lord does not rejoice over their young men and has no compassion on their fatherless and widows, for everyone is godless and an evildoer, and every mouth speaks folly. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burns like a fire. It consumes briars and thorns. It kindles the thickets of the forest, and they roll upward in a column of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts, the land is scorched, and the people are like fuel for the fire. No one spares another. They slice meat on the right, but are still hungry, and they devour on the left, but are not satisfied. Each devours the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh devours Ephraim, and Ephraim devours Manasseh. Together they are against Judah. For all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is stretched out still. All right, so remember the theme so far. Judah is living in sin, following after other gods, having rejected the God of their fathers, in many ways having rejected them. But we see a promise. We see there's always a remnant. We see this promise of a tender shoot out of what appears to be a dead stump. And we'll see that imagery later on, actually. And we see this promise that unto you is born a child, a son is given. The government will be upon his shoulders. Does that mean the government is going to be after him? Well, in some sense, yes. But what it means is he will hold it up by his own power, by his own strength, by his own ability, the governance of the people. So this is to be a man. This is to be a person, a child who is born. And yet his name will be called Mighty God. What child could ever be born who would be rightly called Mighty God, Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father? How are you the Everlasting Father when you're a child who is born? That's why Jesus was able to say, and the Pharisees hated this when they spoke of their father Abraham. He said, before Abraham was, I am. Remember, we had the words of David where he said, the Lord said to my Lord. How's the king speaking of anyone as his Lord, let alone someone who's to come after him? Normally those who come after are less than those who come before, at least from a cultural sense here in Israel. Not the case with this one. This child is born, the son is given, and you will call him Mighty God. And He will sit on the throne of David over his kingdom to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteous, to kingship of no end. And so we're seeing some messianic promise here, some good to look forward to, interspersed with some promise of judgment in the meantime. And so that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're going to see for some time to come. We'll see you guys tomorrow with day 222, where we pick up with Isaiah chapter 10.